So in a departure from the last two books, Moonraker begins by describing what the top agent's Monday goes like. First thing he does, a fair bit of target practice in an underground concrete basement. The idea is for him to try to quick draw as many shots as he can before a machine attempts to hit him. Unfortunately, the machine ends up hitting him with a laser point. However, the person running the test doesn't want to tell Bond that he is still the best shot there is in the entire agency. With this part over, he goes upstairs to the 7th floor where he talks to his secretary, Leola Penzabody, or because it's Monday, Bond always refers to her as Lil, just as a way to razz her a little bit. Bond goes through his usual paperwork when he receives a phone call from his superior officer, M. This phone call, Bond goes up to the 9th floor, which is only reserved for the highest ranking of people in the organization, including M, as well as his secretary. And if you've seen the movies, you can get the idea that as soon as Bond sees Moneypenny, he starts to have a little bit of fun with her. However, the chief of staff is off there in the corner, just like, come on already. M is waiting inside, you know. Hey, after this meeting, you want to do lunch? Yeah, sure, that'll be fine. Bond goes through the double doors, where he has a meeting with M. What he has in store is not necessarily an assignment, but something that is very suspicious. A new scientist by the name of Sir Hugo Drax. He discovered a metal known as columbite, which, due to its light weight and its resistance to heat, is essential in the discovery of firing missiles. He's decided to have him and his team create this brand new missile as a means of defense, which has been called the Moonraker. Not really a whole lot is known about him. We know that he served during World War II, where there was a detachment of Nazi officers known as the Wolverines. They set a bomb to take out various high-ranking officials. The bomb, however, did not end up killing all these people. However, it knocked Drax out, not only leaving him with a case of amnesia, but half of his face is pretty much gone. Wasn't really a whole lot to it from there. He spent a long time in the hospital slowly recovering and just getting little bits and pieces of plastic surgery to get his face put back together again. Once he was released, he often just kind of walked around the docks, as that was one of the few memories that he had. He disappeared for a number of years, where he all of a sudden became a millionaire, discovering this miracle metal of columbite. This is really all just standard stuff, to which Bond is like, okay, so what exactly is the issue here? To which M says, he cheats at cards. This is not only a very serious offense in terms of the gambling world, but it is very confusing that such an upstanding gentleman that basically the whole country has fallen in love with would fall into such a horrible trap. This is strictly being done off books, and it's being done as a favor for the owner of the casino called Blades. He, as well as M, have been together for a little bit, and the casino owner had a bit of an inkling that he was in law enforcement and wanted to see if he could check into this without destroying the potential of this fantastic missile that is being on loan to England. But also to make sure that if the cheating is happening, that the dignity of Sir Hugo Drax isn't going to be destroyed in the eyes of the public. Bond accepts the mission and later meets up with M at the casino. Now, this is something I forgot to mention in my last book review. So in Casino Royale, Bond had a green Bentley that got completely destroyed. It was brought back to life again in Live and Let Die. There wasn't really a whole lot to it. So it's fun to note that when Bond goes back to his flat to kind of brush up on popular sleight of hand techniques, he goes back with his green Bentley. The guy at the motor pool even says, hey, it seems like your turbo's running a little rough. You might want to get that checked out. To which Bond keeps it in mind. But it's fun that such a thing would remain consistent throughout all 3 books. Several hours pass, and Bond starts to head down to Blades in that green Bentley. There's a bit of foreshadowing as Bond parks the car. He looks up into the sky, and it says, Hell trouble is here. And moving a little more to the left, he realizes that this is actually an advertisement for the shell company, and it said, "Summer shell is here." But that is something that is left to be a little more on the ominous side. Bond meets up with M, where they enjoy a nice meal. The interesting thing to note about this place is that they serve everything. So the menu is just covered from top to bottom in a whole bunch of different dishes from all over the world. To which M leans over to Bond and just says, "This is really just kind of a general thing. Whatever you want, they can cook it for you." Bond gives a rather lavish meal, and then M has his meal in advance. After the meal is done, they meet with the head of the casino, where they go over a general idea of what is going to be done. And the other thing to mention as well is that Bond gets a small envelope of benzodrine. I hope I'm saying that right. The basic plan is that he wants to come off as being drunk and being more on the impulsive side. And the only way to do that is to get completely wasted. However, the benzodrine will give him enough attention to still be able to keep his mind on the cards. Now, unlike Casino Royale, the game that is being played is bridge. This is something I looked up the rules for a while ago, and I'm still not entirely sure how it works. All I know is it's a game of 4 people with 2 teams of 2 people, and a lot like pitch, it's all about trying to get several different bets. I think there's like 5 different bets you can have in advance, and that is the highest you can go. During the course of the game, the only real thing to note is that even though Drax is being treated as a posh British gentleman, he is anything but. He has some really coarse language, and for being in a high-stakes casino, his language sounds more like something you would see in a basement pub somewhere. Game goes on. It doesn't really go either way in terms of who's going to win. When Bond spots something, he notices within the massive hands of Hugo Drax is a stainless steel cigarette case. Which Bond is like, this is such an upstanding casino. How in the world would they not know about a shiner? But it's such a subtle thing that only if you are really looking for it would you have seen it in the first place. So with this knowledge, Bond knows that Drax can look at what the top 4 cards are, which can give him quite a massive advantage. However, Bond is able to play the game and cheat in such a way that he has Drax give a fantastic wager, and Bond ends up taking it all. Drax immediately knows that he's been cheated, to which the head of the casino is just like, no, I saw the whole thing. This is completely legitimate. Either take your losses or get out. Drax begrudgingly pays off the bet. However, in doing so, he whispers into Bond's ear, "Spend the money quickly." So Bond, being completely wasted as well as having an exhaustive game of bridge, he doesn't get the bet until 2 o'clock in the morning. However, he still promptly shows up to work the next day at 10 o'clock. His first regiment was to have a bit of hand-to-hand combat training, to which Bond, still recovering from the hangover, is not all that interested in doing. Thankfully, he is saved by another phone call from M. It turns out that there is trouble at the launch site. All of Drax's employees were former Nazi scientists. There was a bit of a scramble between who would get the most elite, either the Russians or those in the UK. And due to the intelligence office vouching for their code of conduct, this case falls under their jurisdiction. There was a local bar just outside of the site called The World Without Want, where one of the scientists kills an Officer Talon who was assigned to watch over the place, claiming that it's because he fell in love with the other officer there, Gala Brand. He kills him and then quickly puts the gun in his mouth and commits suicide. Drax has asked for Bond personally, and that he show up at promptly 8 o'clock that night. Before doing so, Bond is given a bit of a crash course as to who all these people are, as well as general instruments when it comes to rocket science. Now, obviously, it's rocket science, so there's no way Bond is going to be able to digest that all in one meeting, but he's given enough of the basics just to know where to look out for signs of sabotage. Bond in his green Bentley is driving to the cliffs of Dover. He is there promptly at 8 o'clock as requested. And here, as I mentioned before, Drax isn't necessarily the most handsome looking man, having like half of his face being made out of plastic and whatnot. It turns out that he's actually the most handsome of his most ghastly crew that he has on site there. Drax is also very much a punctual person, and 8 o'clock is the time that he has dinner every night. At the dinner, Drax and Bond just kind of go over some housekeeping, generally what the hours are and anything that could be potentially suspicious. But Bond also meets up with the mysterious Gala Brand. At first, Bond tries to put out his feelers a little bit to see if maybe she'd be interested, but turns out that she is a very professional policewoman, and she just gives him her professional courtesy. After dinner, Drax then takes Bond down to the launch site, where the only thing that seems suspicious is nobody has name tags. Instead, everybody has very thin hair on top and some sort of facial hair. Bond asks about this and says that the hair being thin on top is a safety precaution. In case something were to catch fire, there wouldn't be a whole lot to burn. And the facial hair is a way of being able to tell who each person is at a quick glance. It is there that Bond is then sent to the late Commander Talon's room. Takes a look over it and finds a filing cabinet. It's locked, but to Bond, this thing is just merely child's play, so he lifts it up just the right way, undoes the lock, and takes a look through the documents. The only thing he notices is a map, which after dusting for fingerprints, he realizes that there are two prints, those of Talon's and those of Krebs, a worker that went to see what was going on. On the map itself is spotted a small point just off the cliffs. Bond then kind of retraces the steps of where Talon might have been when all this happened. He was probably looking around on the roof trying to get a better picture when he was spotted by one of Drax's men, and that is where the plan to kill him came into place. But why would they want Talon dead, especially this close to the launch of the Moonraker? Early in the morning, Bond goes into town to report all that he has seen so far. All he really has is vague suspicions, but all of it points to something a little more on the nefarious side. When Bond goes back onto the base, everybody is very surprised to see him. At breakfast, Drax explains, saying Major Talon had a phone in his quarters. That's usually where he did all his status reports. He could have just done that instead. To which Bond is like, oh, okay, I didn't know about that. Drax wants to check in and see if there's anything there. Bond just simply says, well, there's a filing cabinet, but it was locked, so I wasn't able to do anything with it. To which Drax opens up a drawer on his desk and says, oh, how careless of me. Here's the key. Your cursory inspection, do you see anybody that might be a little more suspicious? To which Bond gives the name of Krebs, the head engineer of the Moonraker. After breakfast, Bond heads back to his room, but before he even gets in there, he notices that there is somebody inside rummaging through all his stuff. Bond proceeds with caution, opens the door, and sees that it is Krebs. Bond tries to confront him. Krebs pulls out a stiletto knife, the same instrument that carved the initials in the back of his hand in the first book. Bond is able to quickly dispatch the assailant and knocks him out. Bond then revives him to try to get a little more information, but before he can do so, Krebs immediately runs away. This immediately gives Bond a little more suspicion than what he had before. Bond then reports the incident to Drax, to which Drax says Krebs is going to be deported. However, he is too much of an instrumental cog in this great Moonraker project, so he can't be kicked off the project right before it launches, but rest assured, he is going to be under some intense scrutiny from now on. Well, with the Moonraker's fuel supply being cleared out, Bond decides to meet up with Gala. With a little bit of extra time with each other, they both decide to go to the beach to do a little bit of inspection on this odd point on the map. They swim out to it to realize that there is a massive cave in one of the cliffs, to which both Bond and Gala think that, this is big enough for a submarine to come in here. I wonder why, though, as all the necessary materials would have been either brought in by boat or by a big truck. After the swim, they both decide to dry themselves on the beach, when all of a sudden Bond just has this inkling, an instinct. He immediately jumps right on top of Gala, right before half of the cliff face rains down on both of them. It's a good thing that Bond was able to do that, because in doing so, he saved both of their lives. They are stuck within this giant prison of chalk, and it takes quite a while for them to be able to dig out. By the time they do, their clothes are destroyed, they're bloodied, they're full of chalk, and they're just simply exhausted. Gala at first believes that this explosion must have been caused by clearing out fuel lines, to which Bond looks at the cliff and says, "No, that definitely can't be the case. That was a dynamite charge that was placed there. Why would they want us gone?" The pair decide that if they are gone for a while, they can see if anybody misses them, and then potentially see who on earth would try to pull the trigger like that. They go back to their rooms, get a change of clothes, they go outside of the base incognito for a while, and then they come back for dinner that night. Everybody in the room is completely shocked to see that they are alive. Drax is very grateful that both of them are, but that's really about all the information they get out of it. The shock could go either way, but Bond notices that the meal was only set for 3 people. For Drax, for Krebs, and another major engineer. Not one for Gala or for Bond. The next day, Drax has to go into London to be able to check on a few things, to which Bond lazily throws out, "Oh, well, I need to go to London as well. Perhaps I'll see you there." Drax is like, "Yes, perhaps I might." Before the pair go, Bond admires the white Mercedes that Drax owns as his car. It is quite a nice racing machine, and basing it off of Bond's love of the green Bentley, you know that there's a bit of a motorhead in him. So Drax and Gala are in the front seats, with Drax driving, and Krebs is mysteriously in the back seat. There was one particular detail that is very upsetting to Gala. She had been on this Moonraker project for a while, and due to her skills in mathematics, she was the one that was in charge of setting all the gyros. Now, once again, it's rocket science, but for the sake of the book, all you need to know is that this will generally give what the trajectory of the missile would be, so it would land safely for demonstration purposes in London, as well as just get general ideas of how this missile will move, given the different weight of this new miracle metal that's been discovered. The main thing that very much upset Gala about this is that she double-checked her work several times, but yet Drax always seemed to add about 45 to everything. Drax always kept the little figures in a little black book that he kept inside of his jacket. During the drive, Drax has some very intense road rage, which Gala is able to swipe away the book and put into her handbag. Before proceeding, Gala says she needs to stop at a nearby hotel to powder her nose. Drax, as well as Krebs, begrudgingly agree to this. Gala takes this opportunity to take a look at all the figures. In doing so, she realizes that something is very far off. With these numbers, it seems like the missile would drop very close to Buckingham Palace. Gala wants to try to get this information out in London, but doesn't really have a way to be able to do so as of yet. So on the drive back, Gala attempts to reinsert the book back into Drax's pocket. However, Krebs notices and grabs on hard to one of her wrists. She is handled very roughly and is thrown in the back seat. By the time she wakes up, she finds herself to be in an old abandoned house just behind Buckingham Palace. She is tied to a chair where it seems like interrogation is going to be starting real shortly. Gala realizes that the best option is just to pretend that she is passed out, and then hopefully in trying to revive her, she can buy a little more time to maybe try to call for help. The main thing she does note is that Drax and Krebs are both speaking fluent German. Now, Bond wasn't necessarily making up the fact that he had to go to London. In fact, he wanted to check in with the police captain, Valance, while he was there, as well as try to meet up a lunch date with Gala. Coincidentally, Gala also had to see the same police captain. After waiting there for several hours, Bond immediately realizes that something is off. He calls up the police captain Valance to realize that Gala never showed up. Bond asks if Drax has any property in the area, to which he says, yeah, he's got this old abandoned house behind Buckingham Palace. Bond goes there to see that Gala is being carried by the pair. Any onlookers are just simply told, oh, she's feeling kind of faint, we're going to take her to a nearby hospital. Bond knows that there is something very wrong about this, and decides to tail the pair. Now, I'm not going to lie, this section right here feels very similar to Casino Royale, where instead of Vesper being taken, we now have Gala. In fact, it's interesting to note that both have the green Bentley, but instead of a Citroen, we are chasing a Mercedes, which is a German car. Unlike the Citroen, which had a carpet of spikes that causes Bond to lose control, Krebs notices that there is a newspaper truck just in front of them. Krebs jumps out, takes out one of the bungees holding all the newspapers in place, and then immediately jumps back into the car. Bond attempts to take aim before this happens. However, all these newspapers causes him to lose traction, and he crashes. Unlike when this happened in Casino Royale, Bond is actually very well fit. He just only has a few little bruises here and there. But he realizes that he's not going to get anywhere if he attempts to fight off the pair. So he just goes along with them without too much of a hassle. The pair are brought back to Drax's office, where Drax tells his entire life story. It turns out that he actually comes from Germany, not from the United Kingdom whatsoever. During his younger years, he was educated in the United Kingdom, loathed every minute of it. And so when he went back to Germany, he loved it. After finishing his education, he then went into the family business of a metal shop. And that's where he first discovered columbite. However, not really a whole lot could be done with it, as this is when the Nazi Party took over and Drax was really happy to be on board. He had several medals for his fantastic conduct in the war, and his crowning achievement was finding the Wolverines. His plan was that he went to place a bomb to destroy this great officers' meeting, which would have definitely crippled the Allies. In doing so, he borrowed a British uniform. However, before he could set the charges, he was shot down by an Axis aircraft. Somebody else that set off the bomb, and that is where he got destroyed. So being in a British uniform, everybody just assumed that he was on the side of the Allies. Drax feigned the idea of having amnesia. After a while, there was this random name that came up, Hugo Drax. Since he was the only one that wasn't accounted for after the war, he decided to take this name for himself. And there is where he was able to get back into the columbite industry and then slowly plan his revenge. Even though the Führer is long gone, he still wants to see the country burned to the ground. Now the other thing as well is that the missile was contracted to both of them as well as to the Soviets as well. Drax goes to the Soviet Union to instead remove all the gyros that were on top of the Moonraker for study and arm it with a nuclear warhead. Drax then attempts a means of torture. He has a blowtorch that he's willing to use to see what the pair know. Bond decides to just completely destroy him in terms of like personal features, his ugliness, as well as just his stupidity for falling in love with the Fuhrer. This infuriates Drax, to which he roughs him up a fair bit and says, no matter. Once the Moonraker takes off, this entire office is going to be obliterated, and you along with it. Goodbye, Mr. Bond. In his haste, Drax leaves the blowtorch on the table. However, it's not really useful as the blowtorch immediately goes out. It is not a very easy thing, but Bond is able to reignite the blowtorch and use it to be able to set them free. It is there that the pair try to find their means of escape. First, they try to go through one of the ventilators. However, this doesn't work out, as Drax immediately knows that's where they are and starts sending hot steam through them. They aren't able to portray their position and just kind of deal with the red, hot water that's being poured on them. It is no way for them to be able to escape, because now the walls are really all wet and they have no traction. So the only chance they have is that they're going to go into Drax's office and turn on the shower to full blast, and hopefully that'll be enough to keep them from catching on fire. So there is a radio in Drax's office that the pair use to get an idea of when the Moonraker is going to be launched. They realize they only have about 10 minutes, to which Gala basically memorized all the figures in her head as to where this missile is going to go, goes into the control room, adjusts all the gyros, and then both of them go right into the shower to turn it on full blast and hope for the best. Now, while these books have been very much grounded in reality, I have a very hard time believing that just having the shower on full blast was really enough to save them. I mean, I get the idea there were probably like a few doors here and there, but I don't know. I have a very hard time buying that myself. But even more hard to swallow is the idea that the radio in Drax's office doesn't burn up in the flames either. So the pair listen to it to realize that there is a Soviet submarine that is pulling into the observation site, which Drax is going to use as his escape. Obviously, this doesn't work, as Gala redirected the missile to hit directly on that submarine. However, with the nuclear payload, it causes quite a lot of devastation. Probably less so than if it hit Buckingham Palace, but it's interesting that in this one, the mission is successful, but in an unsuccessful way. From there, it's just a whole lot of cleanup to try to explain the mushroom cloud as well as the significant loss of human life. They are able to do it, however, Gala and Bond have to leave the country for a month, to which Bond has gotten a little smitten with Gala. However, Gala has a husband at home, and they're both going to go off and have a bit of a honeymoon with their month. Bond is very crestfallen by this. However, he immediately realizes that he's going to go to Paris, and there's going to be so many fish in the sea that he can find somebody that's much better than her. And that is where the book ends. Now, trying to compare that to the movie. Well, let's just say the movie really just shares the same name. The only thing that's really kept the same is the idea that Hugo Drax is going to incinerate both Bond as well as the leading lady of the book, and they both try their best to escape through a ventilation shaft. That is the only thing that is kept the same. However, in mentioning Moonraker, there are a lot of, shall we say, memes that I feel have to be mentioned whenever discussing this movie. The first is the cucumber sandwich.
May I press you to a cucumber sandwich?
The villain hotline.
Now, regarding your placement for Charlie,
Roger Moore's love of jump scares. The crazy gondola, followed by the double-taking pigeon. And probably one of my personal favorite scenes, just going over Holly Goodhead's equipment.
Not what I want to get stuck with tonight. If he dies. Evidently diary. Trifle overpowering, you'll say.
This movie is just all sorts of nuts, but in my opinion, in the best way possible. I guess I'll just try to summarize a little bit of the movie. So the idea is that Hugo Drax, in this instance, instead of being a ex-Nazi officer, is just a Frenchman who has set up his operations in the United States to try to use his Moonraker program to bring on the conquest of space. The only thing that really leads Bond onto this one is the idea that the RAF was in charge of watching over one of Drax's Moonrakers. There's several of them, and a Moonraker is just a spacecraft in this movie. One of the Moonrakers go missing, and Bond has to kind of look into it. To which it is very obvious from the get-go that Hugo Drax is indeed the big baddie. But at the same time, I really don't care because, well, Michael Lonsdale just does a fantastic job with this character. Through a bit of snooping, Bond sees his next clue in Venice, which is a very popular location in the Bond franchise, so that is where the ending of From Russia with Love is. We also have it in Moonraker, and it is also in the ending of Casino Royale as well. So from there, Bond has to dispatch of one of Drax's henchmen, all throughout this very rare and expensive glass museum, which I guess at the time held the record for the most breakaway glass in a single scene. Bond is able to dispatch the villain, but not before misquoting Casablanca.
Play it again, Sam.
If you saw my review of Casablanca, you'd know the real line is,
Play it.
so by the end of it, Bond realizes that Drax is attempting to wipe out a good chunk of the human race, and then he's going to start up his own super race as well, where basically he's going to be God. Everything else that Bond found out is all part of the tools that Drax is using for his extinction program. Bond is able to not only dispatch the villain, a la Restart Gun, but he is also able to destroy all the poison that was going to take over the world. I could probably go deeper into the story of it, but I didn't want to have to summarize the whole thing because, well, it would be a long time, and I already summarized one story. I don't want to go too crazy, make this a 2-hour video. Probably the other thing I do want to mention is it's fun how this very much feels like a direct sequel to The Spy Who Loved Me. So, as you probably know, I basically know about The Spy Who Loved Me inside and out at this point. In The Spy Who Loved Me, after the cylinder head gasket goes, Bond and Anya then have to walk through the long desert. Now, the composers decided to have a little fun with this scene and put in the main theme from Lawrence of Arabia. There is a callback to this scene in the movie, as right after Bond is able to escape his captors, and as Bond is making his way to one of the Secret Service's branches, they decide to play the theme from the Magnificent Seven. All while Bond is on top of a horse wearing very period-appropriate clothing from that movie. And I guess probably one of the other memes I forgot to note, so I'm not really sure if this one is talked about as much, but I feel like there's a lot of meme potential you could have with this scene right here. So after Bond and Anya get back to the beach surface in the White Lotus S.P.E.C.T.R.E, there is a man on the beach who is drinking a really big bottle of beer. In seeing the car, he then stares at the beer, wondering what's going on. Well, he makes a small cameo again here in Moonraker. In fact, they even keep this gag going as he then appears in the next movie for Your Eyes Only. And then the last little thing to mention as well is as Bond is there at the shark tank fighting off against Jaws, he dispatches him by giving him a quick kick to the groin. And that is where Bond is able to escape, use the giant magnetic hook to pick Jaws up, and then put it back in the shark tank. This is followed up again in Moonraker as Bond attempts the same maneuver while he is in Hugo Drax's base. However, in doing so, we realize that Jaws has reinforced that area with steel. Now, this movie is just crazy, and if you just want a fun, all-around time, this movie is perfect for you.
One last thing I want to mention as well is the inclusion of the Aztec level in GoldenEye. Given the limited technology, I think they did a really good job representing some of these locations.
So, that is Moonraker. I hope you'll join me next time for Diamonds Are Forever. I'm not gonna lie, I just love this color. Until next time, keep having fun.